describe, Rabbi Spiro, this historical reversal, Golden Age, Islam retrograde, Christianity advances, but then we have the Shoah, we have the Holocaust. How does this fit into this historical movement?
Right. So again, the difference between, if you want to compare Enlightenment Europe, where Jews were fantastically over accomplished. I mean, we Jews, one of the great features of being Jewish is thou shalt innovate is like the 11th commandment. Abraham was a radically transformative, think outside the box kind of guy. And I have a whole presentation called Driven, talking about the unique Jewish spiritual DNA, which is not something you can measure in a microscope. But wherever we put Jews, we're always disproportionately impactful because, we have this unique way of thinking outside the box. Jews always question, and an incredible drive. And Jews also, by the way, care disproportionately, usually about everyone else but themselves. These are features you can demonstrate exist. And in any situation we are in, whether it's over 1,000 years ago in the Golden Age of Spain or 100 or 200 years ago in Europe, we see the same characteristics. The question is, what's going on in the background? And the big difference, as I mentioned before, is when Europe moves from the Dark Ages, which is deeply religious, by the way, and very fearful of Jews, but not so open intellectually, to the Renaissance, which is more humanistic and more focusing on reintroduction of the classical knowledge and the mathematics and the science, and a lot of it was coming from the Arab innovations of the Islamic open world. Europe moves away from religion, and it takes a long, long time. Napoleonic Wars are the critical time period in the 19th century when Jews are finally let out of the ghettos and finally, in theory, emancipated. But that comes at unlike in Spain and in the Golden Age, where Jews are able to maintain their Judaism openly and proudly without it being in conflict with their progressing in a larger society. In Europe, as Europe itself doesn't become secular overnight, but certainly religion takes a back seat to a lot of other things, unlike in the Dark Ages, where religion was the central feature of European life. Jews felt that to enter the society, that the religion, keeping kosher, keeping Shabbat, it was all about, I need to really assimilate into this world. The Reform movement was created in Hamburg, Germany in 1811 out of a desire to create a version of Judaism which allowed Jews to minimize their external Judaism, their practice and their lifestyle, put that all aside and remove any barriers that allowed them to fully integrate, which is even a nice way of saying assimilate ultimately, into what was European and specifically German world. So you have I would say, even a greater level of accomplishment of these Jews, but at a far higher price of Jewish identity and a far greater amount of assimilation and even conversion in certain cases. So it's a very different experience. And we see that even until today in the Jewish world, in the Orthodox world, especially the ultra-Orthodox world, the Haredi world's incredible fear of modernity is I would say, collective post-traumatic stress reaction to what the trauma that Jews went through, not physical threats, but the massive toll that the Enlightenment took on Jewish identity and assimilation. And it created a world today which is much more inwardly focused and self-ghettoized, much less open to bringing in foreign influence. So what you don't see in the last few hundred years amongst Ashkenazi Jewish scholarship, which becomes the center of the Jewish world rabbinically, is these Renaissance kind of philosopher rabbi people. You have a few people like the Vilna Gaon who managed to, absorb a tremendous amount of secular knowledge, but not through direct study himself, but students teaching him, reading books on the side. But it's a very rare thing. The rabbis become exclusively rabbis and very rarely will wander outside of that area. And we don't find that level of kind of Renaissance scholar and all, like Hafstad and Shaprut Maimonides and people like that in the Ashkenazi world of today, even until today.